Nebraska Preps Postgame with Damon and Jacob Padilla.
That's a big voice guy, which means we are off and rolling. We are a little delayed this week just because this thing called schedules. A lot of different pressers, a little shuffling every day. I'm shuffling. Yeah, but my man JP Jacob Padilla is here. How you been, bud?
Good. Busy week, but excited to take a break from all that to talk about high school sports with you.
Little high school sports as we do the quick rundown from the previous week and a smidge of foreshadowing from what may to come. We'll start with what was 1 versus 2. It is now 1 versus 3 in the current Mike Sauter poll presented by Dinsdale Automotive. That's a free plug for my man Mike Sauter. He's getting ready to cut the cord, and I think he's traumatized on the bone. It's going to be okay, Mike. It's going to be okay. Get the highest internet speed. You will not be on delay that much, maybe 7-8 seconds, and you're good. Westside, Bellevue West, you were in attendance?
Yes, I was.
Who wasn't in attendance for that one? So, I mean, what'd you think? I mean, a lot of that kind of I felt like I knew. You just don't know how it's going to play out, man. It's different for you seeing both teams. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of like great plays, a lot of talented athletes doing their thing, but the level of play I don't think was quite what we're expecting maybe going in. There were a lot.
Wasn't very
penalties.
Clean, was it?
No, it was 29 penalties, I believe, between the two teams.
Yep. We had 18 of them.
Yeah, 3 interceptions thrown by 2 pretty good quarterbacks. Just some interesting decisions in key situations. So I mean, at the end, Westside, you're able to kind of get that little 2-score lead there to create that cushion, and Bellevue West wasn't able to take itself out of the hole. But it was a 56-35 win. I'm not sure I expected that many points.
Yeah. Okay. So I asked you the week before, right? Because I felt like and we said, hey, the only team to really shut down Sharmar Brown had been Westside. Westside or Bellevue West had given up almost 400 yards on the ground between arguably the top 2 backs and the state, right? They had seen Sharmar Brown, and then the following week it was, and now I'm drawing a blank, Tashawn Porter, right? So we were like, oh, okay, maybe it's just those guys are really, really good. Are you surprised Bellevue West defensively isn't better against the run?
Yeah, and this really was the first time this season that we saw. You mentioned John Ross was doing some stuff coming into the season.
Yeah,
first game that he was able to get kind of going. He was over 100 yards, scored a touchdown there, had a couple of nice receptions. So good to see him going. He had 40 yards in the first 2 games, and
combined,
48 yards on 20 carries in the first 2 games. And came back here and 23 carries for 110 yards and a score by my count. So that was a huge part of it. And then Anthony Rizek, just the stress he puts on you with that quarterback run game. And that really was the difference. He, kept him in check for long stretches of the game. And then Bellevue West did. And then just you make one mistake and he's gone. Rips off a huge game that flips the field. Long touchdown run to kind of WS is hanging around. They're like, oh, we get a stop here. We got a chance to go down and tie the game. And then he's gone, 54-yard touchdown run, something like that. So he made some game-changing plays in that game. And that's hard when you've got the running back, the quarterback run game. And then you've got a few guys on the outside, like Keenan Cotton playing well. Jalen Lloyd went out there and made some nice catches. So just you kind of had a lot of guys firing there again, outside of the penalties. Westside, you guys spread the ball around a little bit, had a lot of different guys making impact. Kurt Kubrick had a huge touchdown run.
He's a fantastic player across the board. He's tremendous defensively. He's a big reason why teams can't run the ball on us. He on the inside with Ian Bo Ryan and that defensive line. Coach Lamanji can play 6 up front, and he rotates them in all in a hurry.
Yeah, and Westside, you guys held Bellevue West to about 70 yards rushing after it seemed like they had maybe found a little bit there, got the run game going with Gio Contreras after kind of an all aired out attack in the first week against Creighton Prep. And they really kept him in check. You force Kalen to throw the ball 42 times. He almost had close to 400 yards, but also had some mistakes.
Almost as many incompletions as completions. So
Yeah.
we'll take that.
Yeah.
It wasn't really an efficient day for him, and so I mean that's the best you're going to do, I think, with a guy like that. We gave him a couple cheapies on some coverage breakdowns, but I felt like as the game wore on and we settled into our new coverage, it got increasingly more difficult for him.
Probably the most disappointing part of that game was the injuries before the end of the first quarter, where your son Caleb got knocked out of the game, hard hit after a reception, I believe, and then Donovan Whitfield too for Bellevue West, their standout safety. Great play on the interception, almost ran it back, got taken down, illegal tackle, ended up getting knocked out of the game as well. And so both those guys, before the end of the game, two of the best defensive players on either side of for either team, both out for the game,
and arguably in the state too. Yeah. Right? It's
those are two all-state safeties right there, gone before the end of the first quarter against in a game that there's going to be that you really need every defensive playmaker capable to balance out that offensive firepower on both sides.
Hey, not to be outdone, as Westside finds a way to get that one done. Gretna and Creighton Prep in what was another costly game in terms of injuries, but for all intents and purposes, man, just a genuine slugfest.
Yeah, it was 16-13 final for Gretna. Prep was up 13-6 at halftime, and really it was two breakaway runs by Marty Brown.
He's a monster.
Yeah, he ended up 18 carries for 214 yards and 2 touchdowns, doing his thing, but those were their only scores of the game. That's kind of the problem there. They're so reliant on him making a big play to score now. And again, they're still kind of figuring out the quarterback situation. Stessman was 4 for 9 for 67 yards and an interception. Donaldson attempted 2 passes. And I mean, they didn't have a single player with more than 1 reception. So those 5 completions were to 5 different players. So they still got to figure that thing out. They got to figure out a way to be more balanced offensively. As good as Shamar Brown is, teams know, like, you got to load up on him. You got to load up on that run game. And you're going to be able, I mean, he's good enough to churn out some yards, but it's hard to sustain an entire drive knowing that you don't really have that offensive balance.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too, because, Gretna is got some work to do. When you think about like complete, who outside of maybe Westside, who I think you think is the most complete, especially when you think offense, defense, special teams, is the next team in Elkhorn South we're getting ready to talk about that team, or do you like Gretna as the next most complete team?
So I haven't seen Gretna yet. I was planning to go to that Millard South game to get my first look at them. And I think just based on what we've seen so far, they're definitely right up there. And actually, you look at that Prep game, Prep did a really good job of keeping Flores in check. He completed 30 of his 38 passes, but it was only for 206 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It was really the ground game, which is kind of counter to what you might expect in that game. They had over 200 yards rushing at 5.7 yards a clip. Isaiah Weber, we talked about who's going to step in from McHuber. He's continued to produce now 22 carries for 152 yards on the ground, just kind of being that workhorse. And Florida has 9 carries for 40 yards as well. So that's kind of showing that they can score both ways. So credit to Creighton Preps defensively. They've hung in there in these games. They're giving themselves some chances. So we know that they've got some pieces on that end. So credit to Gretna for grinding that game out. It was 10-0 in the second half to win that game after falling behind at halftime. So I'll have to answer that question after tonight as we record this on Thursday. But I think those 3 are probably the 3 that you're looking at right now in terms of can run the ball, can pass the ball, and can defend.
Let's go to Elkhorn South. All right, they just they just keep plugging along, man. And you've seen them. They're obviously improving. I'm just gauging. You could say, hey, you know what, DB, that's not accurate. It doesn't seem like they move your needle, but yet a quality football team.
Yeah, and I think probably because we haven't seen the kind of the top teams, they've gotten to play each other. The best team that Elkhorn South has played is Millard South, who is a good team, but they're down in that second tier and they're playing without their quarterback. So The Storm haven't gotten a chance to play Bellevue West or Westside or even Creighton Prep, who we kind of had closer to that top tier coming into the season. Their 3 losses were against the top 3 teams in the state. So whereas like we're still kind of figuring out what Prep is, they've tested themselves against the best and shown they can at least hang with those teams. So that's kind of, I think, what we're waiting for with Elkhorn South. But in terms of what they've done so far, you can only play who's on your schedule.
Right.
And 41-7 against previously unbeaten Papio South team that I know that you liked coming into the season, and it had gotten off to a good start. 20-0 in the first quarter. Then they outscored them 14-0 in the second quarter. 41-7 was the final on that one. And again, it's the combination of Ballard underneath and then the big plays over the top with Ronner. Ballard, 13 carries, 122 yards and a touchdown, and it caught a 40-yard receiving touchdown. And Ronner only attempted 8 passes, completed 5 of them for 140 yards.
Yeah, his yards per completion, he's got to be over 20 yards per on the season.
2 of his 5 touchdowns, or 2 of his 5 passes were touchdowns. And he also carried the ball 6 times for 43 yards and a touchdown, showing he's got some of that dual threat ability. Jackson Morris Wong, another continues to be a big play threat, 92 yards and a touchdown on just 2 catches in the game. Heck, even Maverick Noonan got in there they put him in on offense to score the ball at a 1-yard rushing touchdown, in addition to a sack and a tackle for loss on defense. So, that's the team that continues to get the job done. And like you said, they're in the conversation for most complete, well-rounded teams.
Yeah, and in high school, you never want to fast forward, but as Elkhorn South has Central, Northwest, Fremont, Grand Island, Burke, then North. North potentially is in a similar situation when you look at their schedule, as they won't see Elkhorn South into the end of the season. And in between there, it starts tonight with Benson. What appears to be on paper a very favorable schedule for North, as their next are Benson, Central, Northwest, Fremont, Grand Island.
Coming off a 48-13 win over Columbus. And I think the biggest story coming out of that is Sebastian Circo back on the field, 7 for 12 passing for 190 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, you talk about pretty efficient passing there. Nearly 200 yards on just 12 pass attempts. Really complete game for Trey Brown, an 80-yard rushing touchdown, 2 catches for 2 touchdowns, and then 8 tackles on defense. And then Tayshawn Porter, 4 carries for 131 yards.
Yeah, I don't even know how that happens. I don't. I mean, to be honest, you just don't see that very often. And I'm just thinking to myself, that's a quick night's worth of work.
Yeah, I was gonna say, imagine that, basically getting to take the night off without really hurting your season averages.
And it gets another week to heal that ankle.
Exactly. So it's a perfect night for him. Gets to go out there, get a couple of touchdowns, and gets an easy win, and doesn't have to put too many carries out there. So, like you said, it's a really fun game that we're going to see at the end of the week. And now both teams are next 4 or 5 weeks here. Take care of business, fine tune things, try to get and stay healthy, and then we'll have a heck of a showdown.
Right? With what we're seeing in the Metro, it has become with a lot of these key injuries, it has become a season of attrition here coming up. You take a look at so listen, the number 6 Creighton Prep. We talked about this next team. This was the surprise of the week, where number 7 Millard South stubs their toe against currently number 9 now ranked Millard North, who is a team that I've studied all week on film as they play Omaha Westside. They have some pieces.
Yep, 2-1 start to the season, and Quaintance has been out. They've had Evan Hansen step in there, got the job done at quarterback there, completed 5 of his 8 passes, 72 yards and 2 touchdowns, and carried the ball 18 times for almost 100 yards and another touchdown. So he's responsible for all 3 of their scores. Pierce Mooberry had a really interesting season. Really talented youngster, sophomore there. They're using him all over the place. He's just doing a little bit of everything. He's running the ball. He's catching the ball. He's playing defense. So his stat line: 7 carries for 46 yards, 3 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown, 5 tackles and an interception. So again, doing a little bit of everything. And I know he puts out his kind of weekly highlights, and every week it's like that, just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, making a big play here. So he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on down the road as that Millard North team continues to progress and develop. So that's a huge win for them. Obviously, anytime you've got the kind of in-town rivals there. I know that the Mustangs were fired up over that one. It was 2014 was the final. I didn't get to see a box score, the Miller South Side, to kind of see from their perspective kind of where their struggles were, but we'll see how they bounce back against Gretna. Obviously things aren't going to get any easier.
So this team's kind of laying in the cut. They've got a big one tonight. Number 9 ranked, the Kearney Bearcats come to town to take on Bellevue West. We'll see who's healthy and in the lineup for Kearney, but so far up to this point, they've been as good as advertised with Coach Cool.
Yeah, 3-0 start to the season, coming off a 34-7 win over Lincoln North Star, who had won its first 2 games. Got off to a good start there. And that's impressive, the 34 points. Kearney's kind of grinded. Obviously, we saw week 1 against Lincoln East there. Real low-scoring grinder of a game. Found a way to kind of open it up a little bit more. They're going to have to score some points to keep up with Bellevue West because we obviously we know that they're the high-flying attack. Even they continue to spread the ball around. We talked about Kyrell Jordan coming into the season. He was the one guy who hadn't had a huge game. And then, sure enough, against Westside, he made some ridiculous plays, showed some great footwork. And Isaiah McMorris continues to kind of rack up things, even as he's still kind of learning about the Bellevue West system and what he needs to do to play there. Just the natural talent and ability is just shining through.
Yeah, I felt like they were 1-2, probably Jordan 1, or maybe 1 and 1A is a better way to look at it than McMorris. For whatever the reason, Davon Hawley just couldn't get going.
Well, it's interesting. The previous week they started putting him on defense, and now he's playing both ways at quarter and receiver.
I mean, sometimes that'll happen, right? I don't really use that as like there are a lot of good guys that play 2 ways. Yeah. I think managing kind of the impact, and it's playing complementary with him is where I think maybe you're getting at, right? It can't always be the verticals and the goes. I mean, sometimes you got to get him involved in some quick game. Just get the ball in his hands because he's extremely explosive.
Yeah, and that's the thing with those guys. It comes down to the play calling, who manages to beat his guy. You got so many weapons that you're not going to have 3 guys putting up 100 yards in every single game. So I think Davon previous week had a huge game. You guys had a good defensive game plan against him, and other guys were able to step up. So that's the kind of trap that Kearney finds itself into. You can't load up on any one guy because they've got 3 guys out there that can go single-handedly beat you over the top.
And right there, we talked about the good Millard North win against Millard South, and they've got a big one this week against Omaha Westside. And looky here at number 10 in the top 10, the team that you and I asked about, right? We're in the preseason. Is this the year for the Silverhawks? And are they making the statement in Lincoln?
31-17 win over Lincoln East, and
it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, especially East that had already knocked off Southeast, so you're kind of wondering kind of how all those Lincoln teams would fall out. We said probably like Southwest roster the best overall, and here they are off to a good start to the season. 3-0 now, again coming off that win over Lincoln East, and it was 10-10 game at halftime, and then they just kind of took over, outscoring them 14-0 in the third quarter and held on for there. They've got a veteran quarterback in Colin Fritton, who was efficient, 9 of 11 passing, 148 yards and a touchdown. Scored a touchdown on the ground as well. Cal Newell, a running back, had a huge day, 27 carries for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns. I know Jackson Carpenter had a sick touchdown, went up and took it over the top of the defender. They've got some athletes out there, and for East, they continue to kind of ease Jeter Worthley in there as a sophomore at quarterback. He did some good things. He put up most of their yardage. Again, they've fallen back to he was their entire running game, 20 carries for 76 yards, so and a touchdown. Not super efficient, but I mean, you probably don't want your quarterback having to do as much. That's 22 passes, 20 rushes. You got to find some complementary play from there. But fortunately for them, they're able to get Malachi Coleman back on the field. 3 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown, and had 6 tackles. So easing him back in there after missing week 2. But yeah, Southwest is looking like, hey, they're looking like the team to beat in Lincoln right now.
It's good to have Coleman back, kind of playing and contributing in a way that he's accustomed to playing. When you take a look at Class B, I mean, you look at the rankings in Coach Sauter's poll, and Mike Sauter's poll.
That's the other Sauter.
I was surprised to see Omaha Gross jump Bennington in the coaches poll.
Yeah, I was talking to Mike about that because he shared it to me. There's a little bit of coach shenanigans going on there with certain coaches trying to check their own players' egos and voting teams lower than they probably belong. But yeah, Bennington 33-10 win over York, and you're dropping down to where they are. But yeah, I think Bennington will be just fine. 3-0 start.
You think?
But I just knocked that out real quick. Nick Colbert, 24 carries for 206 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also 3 catches for 20 yards. So yeah, you lose Dylan Mostick. They're just fine there on the ground game. Colbert was a really good player last year as a backup for them, and now he's kind of making that spot his own. Shout out to Kyler Lordson, 15 tackles, including 4 for loss and a sack.
He's tough.
So yeah, Bennington loses a lot. They still got a heck of a lot back, and they're going to be firmly in the mix there at the top of B. But the game that I went to, Gross and Elkhorn, and
fantastic game. It was a Thursday night matchup on television.
Yep, and it was Gross ended up pulling that out 21-14 over Elkhorn, and that was what allowed them to leapfrog up from was it 3-1 there in Sauter's coaches poll, and 3-0 start for the Cougars. I wrote in my story, but the first time since 2008, I think it was something like that they've won their first 3 games of the season. They haven't had a winning season since winning the Class B championship in 2012.
And stay right there, because they are arguably playing in the biggest game of the week.
Yep.
It is Omaha Gross taking on the team we were just getting ready to get to, Blair.
But
Blair, the team that I said keep an eye on, even though Gross was my dark horse, something definitely is going to give this week.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be a heck of a matchup tomorrow night.
Yeah, I was impressed with Gross. And I hadn't seen them play. I'd heard some of the names. I know it's funny. Sal Nacarelli, one of their linemen, plays both ways for them.
Hey, how about pretty decent frame?
Well, so the funny thing is, like, I knew him when he was in 4th grade, this little guy, and I hadn't seen him for years. And seeing him run out there on the field, like, dang, this isn't a little Sal anymore. So
he's got
he's grown up.
Tremendous frame, and I tell you, in my opinion, that's the matchup. It is the offensive and defensive line of Gross against the skill and the quarterback play of Blair.
And Nacarelli, the thing that I was impressed about him is like mobility for a guy of his size, where they were pulling him on the offensive side of the ball, and like I saw a play where he just pounded a guy into the ground, and then the next play they pulled him around to act as a lead blocker. And then on defense, there were 2-3 times where he made the tackle downfield. They got past the line of scrimmage. He pursued the play and finished it to prevent a long run. So just kind of the range that he showed off there. And they've got some big dudes up front on both sides of the ball.
Yes, they do.
Which opens up the way for a terrific running back in Jake Garcia, who almost 150 yards on the ground, 148 on 16 carries. Had a long breakaway 59-yard run. And then Owen Brennan ended up being the MVP of that game with the go-ahead touchdown that Sauter caught the even better video of than I did.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Not the greatest of tackling from Elkhorn, but credit to him for sticking with it, staying on his feet, bouncing off, and then shooting straight to the end zone. And then immediately after that, he came back and made some huge plays on that next defensive stand to maintain that lead. So they've got some good players. They got some good receivers and DBs play both ways. I know Charlie Palladino was all over the field, double-digit tackles, and they used him on offense a little bit as kind of a gadget, jet sweep type of guy. So they've got some pieces. I don't think it's a deep team, which you're not going to find a lot of in Class B, but their collection of guys, they got a lot of guys that play both ways, a lot of guys that play a lot of snaps, and those guys, they hung in there strong till the end of the game. Elkhorn, KJ Schenk, kind of workhorse back there, 34 carries, 143 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But Gross took the lead, and credit, like they're running out there old school football where 5 linemen, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. They're not even playing a wide receiver on the field most of the time. So they're running that option, they're running that downhill, the fullback dive, all that sort of stuff. And it was impressive the way that they were able to sustain drives that way. But at the same time, once Gross took the lead and you had the clock running down, they just weren't effective. They weren't able to be effective enough through the air to kind of run off the 4 or 2 minute drive there to answer late. So that's kind of what Elkhorn's got to figure out. They got to be a little bit more explosive, but it's a good team too. Again, a 21-14 win. I was impressed with both teams from what I saw. And you mentioned Blair. That's 42-3 win over Ralston. It was 21-0 in the first quarter, 35-3 at halftime. Ralston, 116 total yards. They had 2 completions, 2 of 20 passing. So really impressive defensive performance. And Bodie Suckup, you mentioned the quarterback there, 182 yards, 12 of 18 passing, 2 touchdowns. They ran for almost 200 yards as a team. So that'll be a fun one on Friday with Gross and Blair. And again, anytime great. We had multiple matchups between 1, 2, 3 last week, and now we got it again down here in Class B.
Hey, not to be outdone, I see one real quick is how about Pierce and Ron Colley? If it's not Gross and Blair, then I think, and you're not in love with anything in Class A, Pierce and Omaha Ron Colley should be nothing short of fantastic, especially offensively.
Yeah, and another big one is the one coming off the big 33-14 win for Aurora. And that was a close one, and then 20-0 run to end the first half for Aurora to kind of pull that thing away. And Carlos Galazzo, 34 carries,
Carlos things,
249 yards, 3 touchdowns. So just kind of the standard game for him. So
isn't it weird when you pencil a guy for like 2 bills?
Yeah. Yep. And multiple scores, and yeah, it's just kind of what he does. So if Pierce takes care of business against Roncalli, we're looking at Aurora and Pierce, maybe a collision course in Lincoln at the end of the season, because I don't know.
A little Carlos, a little Ben and Carlos wouldn't be too bad, would it?
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
That's another week, man. We had to go rapid fire. It's Nebraska Preps Post. That's Jacob Padilla. I'm ODB. We'll be back next week, regular time slot. We will be Monday, correct?
Potentially, yeah. We have the option to go Monday. We got to figure out the scheduling, but we'll be back next week.
We're
for sure.
thinking Monday, but we'll let you know ahead of time. That's another week in Nebraska Preps Postgame. Don't you dare miss us next week.